All right, to everyone popping in again, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We will get started here in just a little bit. I do want to remind you that at the end, in order to potentially win one of our $50 Amazon gift cards, there will be a form that you will fill out. At the end, it's very quick, it's very brief, it's 2 or 3 questions, and I will make sure to share that in the chat once we wrap up. It is 2 p.m. Eastern, and I do see that we have a group of our attendees here. So again, thank you so much for joining us. I would love to get started. Today, we're going to be talking about developmental algebra. We're going to be talking about this with 2 of the members of our developmental algebra team. My name is Ian Craig. I'm the Math Content Portfolio Manager here at Hawks Learning. Basically, what that means is I oversee, with the group of editors like Barbara and Rebecca here, kind of all of our mainline math and statistics products, whether developmental algebra, curriculum level, or statistics. So that is my background, and I've been here almost 2 years now at this point, but was a high school teacher before this. So please, Barbara and Rebecca, would you mind also introducing yourselves?
Hi, I am Barbara Miller. I have worked here for about 11 and a half years now. I've been an editor, lead editor, and project planner during the time here. Before working at Hawks, I earned a bachelor's and master's degree in theoretical math. Both of those have a focus on linguistics, so I like numbers and words, so this job fits me pretty well. Also, before starting here, I was a private tutor for about 7 years, mostly focusing on the developmental algebra range of topics, all the way up through liberal arts type topics. And I also taught at a community college for a year right before starting here. And I did teach with some Hawks products, which is how I got to know the company. And my focus there was with the developmental algebras. I taught with introductory algebra that we have here. And also I taught a class called contemporary math. And that was before we had our viewing life mathematically text. And my main focus of topics here, as I said, is all the dev algebras, like anything from beginning math all the way up to right below college algebra, and the viewing life mathematically, which is quant lit liberal arts in that bubble.
And I've worked at Hawks for almost 14 years. Sorry, my name's Rebecca. Before that, I taught middle and high school math at a private K through 12 school in South Carolina. And then I moved to Santa Fe Community College, where I taught pre-calculus, trig, and college algebra. When I first started at Hawks, I was working on the college algebra titles, but since then I've mostly been in the developmental math world working with Barbara. I work some on editing the textbooks, but mostly I work with the question bank on the online platform. So it's nice to be able to do a little of both and kind of go back and forth. And I have been involved with both aspects of for all of the titles that we're discussing today.
Awesome, thank you both. I guess I should have also clarified when I started as an editor here at Hawks, and I worked mostly on our actual curriculum level math titles. So a lot with our new Calculus with Early Transcendentals title was mainly the bulk of work I did, but I also bachelor's and master's in theoretical math myself too, and I also double majored in Spanish linguistics. So Barbara, maybe that's something that we didn't know that we really had in common at this point, but that is something that that's very cool because math is a language after all. So it's really cool to think about that in that way. Thank you so much for your introductions, and again, thank you to all who are just coming in. We really appreciate you spending your afternoon with us talking about the developmental algebras. I guess my first question, and Barbara, I kind of am looking at you for this one. I mean, what are our new developmental math products, and specifically, what content do they cover?
All right, so the most recent editions, we have 3 of them. We have Developmental Mathematics, that is the new 3rd edition, Preparation for College Mathematics, also 3rd edition, and Algebra for College Students, which is 7th edition. If anyone is familiar with the Hawks products, you might be familiar with the title Algebra for College Students, but you might also know it as its previous name, Intermediate Algebra. It has kind of had a shift in title, but it is the same course, same content. For the contents and topics that they cover, Developmental mathematics and preparation for college mathematics. They're kind of very similar textbooks. They have a few differences, but they mostly cover all of the same topics. They start at whole numbers and then they go all the way through to conic sections, which you might be thinking it's a lot of content, and that's intentional because it is for use for a 2 or 3 semester course, but you can always just pick and choose what you need from it and build your own course or use it for your courses, whether it's 1, 2, or 3 semesters. And I guess it's worth mentioning that neither of those are intended for credit-bearing courses because they are developmental algebra topics. So they will prepare students to either go into the STEM pathway, starting with college algebra, or go into the non-STEM, which would be kind of liberal arts or any other kind of terminal class where students really only take 1 or 2 math classes after that. The other product is Algebra for College students, and this one is the highest of our developmental mathematics products. So it's the highest level, I mean. It is right below college algebra. It does cover a lot of the same topics that the developmental mathematics and preparation for college mathematics covers, but it kind of starts halfway through those 2 books. So if you need a lot of those topics, but you don't need the very basic things like what's a whole number, how to work with integers and things like that, Algebra for College students starts at a review of real numbers and then goes up to the conic sections and then continues on into sequences, series, and the binomial theorem. And this one is intended for either a 1 or 2 semester course, depending on how the school sets up their math sequence. And again, this one is not intended for a credit-bearing course, but some schools have used it for their college algebra. So I guess if you supplement it a bit, it will work out for that.
That's awesome. I mean, that's a very wide range to cover. I mean, I think we know that the developmental algebras has the most nuance when it comes to how to get students into the various pathways at either 2 or 4 year institutions, and even by state, even by institution, it varies so wildly. So I guess a question that kind of comes to my mind is, how do schools or instructors or institutions kind of determine which of these products and which of these coursewares or texts fits their course best? Like what's that pathway, to use that word?
Right. So I guess I covered a little bit of this with the algebra for college students. It's a lot of words to say each of these titles over and over. So that one, if the next course in the sequence will be college algebra, you would want the algebra for college students if it's just a 1 or 2 semester course. Sometimes we refer to this one as a baby college algebra because it does cover so much of the same content, but at a lower, more introductory level. And compared to the developmental mathematics and preparation for college mathematics, it does cover a few more topics that those don't. All of them have an introduction to matrices, but the algebra for college students also covers determinants. So it goes a bit deeper into that topic. And it'll also move a little faster than the other 2. And then if you're deciding between developmental mathematics and preparation for, for college mathematics, there's 2 main questions that you would want to ask. The one is, when are integers introduced? And the other is, when is the basic equation solving introduced? For both of those questions, the answer is in chapter 2 for preparation for college mathematics. So that one, it introduces integers and equation solving early, and then it uses it throughout the rest of the book. Meanwhile, developmental mathematics, it just starts with whole numbers, then it jumps to fractions, and then continues on and pretends that negative numbers and equation solving doesn't exist until about chapters 8 and 9. So it really just depends on what the different schools or departments require. of which one you would want to pick. It's such a wide variety of which schools want which one. So that's why we have both versions.
Awesome. It's nice to kind of have those different options, especially because we would hear from a lot of people that there, again, with all the nuance in the developmental algebras and the different approaches, and even from an equity standpoint, just where students are. I mean, it's nice to know that there at least is an option that is not kind of like a calculus that doesn't introduce early transcendentals, right? Like there's an option to have a different place to kind of ramp onto that scaffold, and I do appreciate knowing that. So I guess this is probably more for Rebecca. What about the features of these titles? And so we've kind of talked about the purpose behind them. We've talked about the content that's in the three. We've talked about how to kind of determine who uses which title. So what do these titles offer then feature-wise?
Yeah, well, so developmental mathematics and preparation for college math, both of those have an associated guided notebook, which guides the student through that content using fill in the blank note taking. Each lesson in the guided notebook has an example that students can watch and follow along with, and then a similar example for them to complete on their own. These guided notebooks also have short exercise sets so students can practice what they've learned in each lesson, and they contain the chapter projects from the text, which is actually another feature of the titles. All three that we've discussed or that we're discussing, they all have 2 chapter projects at the end of each chapter. And these projects just provide an opportunity for students to put what they've learned in that chapter to use in a real world application scenario. The projects could be completed individually, which is nice, but they're also good ways to promote collaboration if you want to use them as group projects. Also in each text, we've included various sidebars throughout the lessons. We have math tips and notes that provide just-in-time helpful hints and reminders as students are working through examples and learning new material. And there's also historical or just otherwise interesting tidbits thrown in that relate to the concepts being covered. Each of these 3 titles also has a chapter called Strategies for Academic Success. This is a chapter at the beginning. It helps students navigate their math course, effectively manage their time for studying, and reduce their stress and anxiety and prepare for math exams. This content is especially useful for students who've struggled with math in the past, or maybe they're returning to college after a break in their studies. And then lastly, our Hawks website offers instructor resources associated with each of these titles. You can find PowerPoints to use as teaching slides, links to formula pages, and also all of the chapter projects that I mentioned earlier from the textbooks can be found in the instructor resources.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. I especially love the strategies for academic success chapter, kind of the chapter 0, if you will, kind of the more, I don't want to say exclusively soft skills, but kind of more of the pieces that go along with where a non-traditional and frankly traditional students really fall into that, the kind of fear of math, discussing some of that metacognition and kind of recognizing some of the insight into oneself as a student about how they feel about math and where they're coming from with math, because we know that students don't walk in the door just as a blank slate ready to learn, everything about systems of equations. I mean, we have this expectation that students are coming with all of the preconceived pieces that they have, not just in their life, social, emotionally, but also in terms of how they view and think about math. So it's a very intentional piece to kind of just take a pause and think about those things from the student perspective. Some instructors like to sprinkle those kind of throughout the course, so kind of move them in between lessons. I just talked to an instructor yesterday that was talking about how they like that they can kind of break it apart and choose how they want to use it, as opposed to it's at the beginning and we do it in week 1 or however that looks. They like the ability to kind of customize and move something like that around, which is really a feature we offer in all of our courseware, the ability to kind of customize those learn screens and customize the question bank, because we do have a default, but you can also kind of customize those pieces. I think that that's a really cool feature and is very intentional for students that definitely need it, and probably the ones that don't realize that they do. So we've kind of talked about some of the features. So Rebecca, I will come back to you for this one. Um, we also talked about the fact that two of these are in their third edition and one of them is in their seventh, right? So a natural question that kind of comes up to me is what are some of the highlighted kind of updates from each of these previous editions to their current ones, their new ones? What have we done with those?
Yeah, well, one of the biggest updates that I worked on personally for all three of these new editions is the question bank. So where students are seeing questions online. And we added over 200 new questions for developmental mathematics and for preparation for college mathematics. And for the Algebra for College Students title, we actually added over 1,300 new questions in this new edition. The previous edition of that title was a good bit older, so we were excited to have the chance to really expand on its question bank and sort of bring it up to a level that we're proud to offer. And then another feature that I mentioned earlier is these chapter projects. And again, all three books have this, but those are new to the Algebra for College Students title. The other two titles, they did have chapter projects in their previous edition, but only one per chapter. And so now they have two. And then I really enjoyed hearing you sort of elaborate on the strategies for academic success. That chapter is a great feature, and it was also in the previous editions of developmental math and preparation for college math. It has been drastically updated and improved for those new editions, and we have added it to the Algebra for College Students. So that's been, I talked about it as a feature, but it's also a really, been an update for the new editions. And then one other thing to sort of specify about Algebra for College Students is regarding the exercise sets. Again, since that was an older previous edition, we wanted to spend some focus on that. And in the new edition, the exercise sets are really nicely organized into concept checks and then practice questions, application questions, and some writing and thinking, even collaborative learning questions. So this organization, it matches how the exercise sets were already laid out in the previous editions of developmental math and preparation for college math. And in all three of those, we have updated the exercise sets to include more application exercises.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the detailing on that. And something to note is, I mean, we're talking about a substantial number of questions that have been added to the courseware component of these products. But one piece to also mention is when we say that we've added one new question, that is really kind of more in concept like one new question type or case in a sense, because we also have iterations of each of those questions that can range from, we shoot for about 30 to 50 for each different question case, meaning if you have some question that comes up, there's at least 30 to 50 different variations of that question that we have in the software for that. So even though we're talking about 1,300, 1,400 new questions being added for Algebra for College students, that's not including the number of variances and iterations, so to speak, of each of those questions. And I've also learned why we abbreviate all of our titles, because internally, when we're talking about it, we often call it DEV for developmental math. And now I really understand why, because it is a mouthful to say those titles over and over again. So that's something I've learned in this webinar. So again, thank you so much for kind of elaborating on those pieces. Before we kind of start to wrap up with some other just minor questions, if you have questions to add in the Q&A piece, please feel free to add those. We would love to hear from you. And again, just as a reminder for a chance to enter that, to win that $50 Amazon gift card, I will be sending a link in the chat here momentarily for you to fill out. It's just a very quick 2 or 3 question piece to kind of get information about you and also enter to win this Amazon gift card. So I guess one thing that I did actually want to ask is, we've talked about these kind of 3 mainline developmental algebra titles, so to speak. If it's not putting you on the spot too much, what other dev math products do we have in the works? And also, what are our other developmental offerings just kind of in general?
All right, so The ones we have in the works are Introductory Algebra, which will be a 7th edition, and then the combination text of Introductory and Intermediate Algebra. And those are both, the current 6th editions are a little bit older, so these are going to be very nice and fresh, and we're just happy that we're working on them, because the improvements are going to be similar to the algebra for college students, that they're going to be great books. We're making good progress on them, but I'm not entirely positive when it'll be available. So the other products we do have, if I can remember all of them, we have basic college mathematics, which is the lowest of our offerings. It starts with whole numbers, and then it barely gets into solving equations, I think. I don't have all the table contents memorized, so sorry if I don't give perfect summaries. After that is pre-algebra, which is a little higher. I guess one way to compare is the beginning of developmental mathematics would be basic college or mathematics, and the beginning of preparation for college math. I can't remember titles now, I've said them too many times. But anyways, the beginning of that one would be pre-algebra. So that would be another way if you're deciding between the two books, like, do you want to start with basic math or pre-algebra? And then other offerings we have an Algebra Foundations course, which is kind of similar to developmental mathematics, but has a different author and a different style. So if you want a different approach, that is something to consider. Let's see. We also have Viewing Life Mathematically, which is not a dev algebra offering. And those are the main ones I could think of besides the 5 I've mentioned otherwise. We do have a few state-specific ones, but if you're not in those states, you might not want them.
Well, I know I did kind of put you even more on the spot with that, but I just was kind of curious to kind of hear the more holistic picture of the developmental algebra piece, because even though these three titles that we discussed in depth today kind of feel like those mainline titles, I mean, that doesn't mean that there isn't the other components to it. And I do know that your team kind of oversees the Viewing Life Mathematically, more quant reasoning, quant lit, liberal arts course too. So that is just kind of cool to see those pieces interchange. Well, here's what I'd like to say. Again, it is about 2:22 p.m. I do want to say thank you so much to everyone for joining. In the chat right now, I'm going to be putting in our Jot form. What this Jot form is this is the link that you will click to enter your information to potentially win that Amazon gift card. Again, I do want to say thank you so much for joining us today to talk about these different courses or different products. I do appreciate very much, and thank you so much for spending your time. Jim, I see that you're raising your hand. Would you like to speak and ask a question or anything? Okay, maybe not. That's okay. But here's what I will also say is that if you do have a question, please, you can enter it right in the Q&A section. We'll hang out here for another few minutes. Again, just as a heads up, there is a Jot form link in the chat right now, and that is how you can enter to win the Amazon gift card. I will also be including my email address for any questions that you might have, whether there's, a technology thing that's going on right now, or you do have a question, or you would like more information, please feel free to shoot me an email. I'd be more than happy to kind of talk through and answer any questions that you might have. I did see someone pop up and said, hey, thank you guys, you're awesome. And you know what? I'm going to answer that one live and say, appreciate that. Good to hear from you again. I do actually have two questions that came through. So Barbara and Rebecca, the first one is, do all of our titles have a guided notebook? And do all of the titles have projects? The first thing I'll say is yes, all of our products, sorry. Do all the titles have a guided notebook? Do all of them have chapter projects?
All right, so not every one of the products has a guided notebook. Right now, of the ones we talked about, developmental mathematics and preparation for college mathematics, those have a guided notebook. We do not have one for algebra for college students just because there hasn't really been a want for it from schools. But if eventually people say they really want it to use it, because the guided notebooks are kind of awesome, we can make them. And then for projects, all of the newer ones that we've talked about, developmental mathematics, preparation for college mathematics, algebra for college students, those have the two projects per chapters. And then the two new upcoming titles of introductory algebra and then the combination title, those will have two projects per chapters. But out of our other offerings, not every single one does. So it really just depends on which book. But one of the things is if you use one of the other products we have and chapters or content overlaps, you can use the same projects. You'll just have to ask us and we'll get them to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And just as a note also about the guided notebooks, just in general, these are guided notebooks that go along with the core content of the textbooks themselves. We also have some courses, sorry, I keep saying courses. We also have some products that go over and have a guided notebook for the integrated review portion or like the co-requisite portion, and that's kind of a separate style of guided notebook where it's the same kind of premise and the same idea, but it's formed for that co-requisite piece. So like our college algebra text, for example, or pre-calculus text, they have guided notebooks that form the integrated review portion of that go along with that in the courseware. So those are guided notebooks as well for those titles, but not for the core content, if that makes sense. So there's a little bit of a difference of how we use the title guided notebook for the developmental algebras compared to some of the curriculum level STEM pathway titles. We did have a question that was, do you have PowerPoint slides for college algebra? And the answer to that is yes, that we do. And we actually have PowerPoint slides for the majority, if not all of our titles as part of the instructor resource page that Rebecca mentioned. Any clarification on that, Barbara, Rebecca?
No, not besides all of the math products should have PowerPoints and they're readily available. And if you want to customize them, you can just open the PowerPoint and change things as you want.
Yeah, which is real again, the customization piece at Hawks is a very big kind of core tenant, so to speak, of Hawks, and that is definitely a piece that is relevant or is super helpful to just open those up and edit them as you need, because you might have learns screens that you use that are customized that you might have edited some of the kind of content piece of it and you'd want that reflected in PowerPoint slides. So that's a very intentional piece. One other question we had here is, can you use the guided notebook with OER texts? And so what I do want to say with this is likely not, because the guided notebook really is tailored to the core curriculum and attached to that text itself. Theoretically, could you buy the guided notebook and do that on its own independently? Yes, but frankly, we wouldn't recommend it without either the textbook component that goes with it or the courseware that also aligns with it. Barbara, what do you think about that?
It would be really hard to use the guided notebooks without the accompanying software or textbook because students wouldn't be able to find the correct or intended answers without having those to guide them. As Ian said, they're very tailored to the products that we have.
And especially like the videos, all those watch and learns and all of those kind of those pieces, I mean, without the courseware or text component to that, I mean, it would be losing a portion of, again, what's the very purposefully scaffolded and intentionally created guided notebook that goes along with that core content. Again, I do want to say thank you so much. I will, as I just got another question about it here, I will repost that Jotform link right here in the chat. Again, at about 2:30 Eastern, in about 1 minute, I will be closing the webinar. Again, I do want to say thank you so much to everyone that joined us this afternoon for spending your time with us discussing not just kind of the developmental algebra and some of the approaches that we've had, but also our titles as well and how they align to various different needs of the nuance of a developmental algebra student. I also want to say thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Rebecca, for joining me on this and talking about, I mean, I know that you're extremely proud and excited about these products, and that's something that to me is very evident, and we're very grateful to have you working on those titles. Any kind of last thoughts before we wrap up?
No, just thank you for joining us and listening to us talk about these long titled products.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much for, and now I will go back to my happy abbreviation land
Yes.
and then struggle to remember that it's preparation for college mathematics, even though now I've heard it 20 times. Everyone, thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday, and we hope to talk to you soon. Thank you so much.